Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about energy flow through ecosystems. So this is an ecosystem of the Arctic, and you can just see how the energy is flowing, right? So the arrows are pointing to what's eating it. So for example, the phytoplankton is getting eaten by the zooplankton, which is then eaten by the fish, and so on and so forth. So, a couple things to review. So, a food chain is just one path of energy flow. So, grass to grasshopper to mice to bird. And then, food web, everything is connected. So, it's much more complex. And in reality, ecosystems are more like food webs. So, the activities of autotrophs and heterotrophs help the flow of energy through ecosystems. So, autotrophs obtain their energy through physical or chemical parts of the environment. So photosynthetic organisms get their energy from the sun, like plants and algae, and chemosynthetic organisms, mostly bacteria, get their energy from inorganic molecules in the environment with or without oxygen, or like the tube worms at the bottom of the ocean. Heterotrophs obtain their energy from other organisms. So heterotrophs like us, we break down lipids and carbohydrates and proteins and use those that energy, and we break them down with hydrolysis. So here is an example of a ecosystem pyramid, and then this is the food web. So just a couple of vocab words that you need to just remember is a producer is another name for an autotroph or a plant. A primary consumer would be the herbivores, so they eat the plants directly, like deer or elk. Secondary consumers would be predators that eat herbivores, so here they're labeled primary predators, so that could be a wolf, or a wolf could be a secondary predator too. 10% of the energy is transferred up the food chain, right? And 90% is lost in the metabolism of the organism and in heat. So that's why the population biomass goes down of these different levels because less energy is available. So as you go up the food chain, this population sizes become smaller as you get higher because there's less energy. So for example, if you think of the wolf population, there's not a lot of wolves because they're not getting a whole lot of energy from those the food that they eat. If you think of killer whales, same idea. Something like a blue whale that eats a lot lower on the trophic level is going to be able to get a lot bigger. So DDT is a chemical that I wanted to just give an example. It was used to kill mosquitoes, and it's soluble in fat. So it accumulates in the fatty tissues of animals in the higher trophic levels, and that's called biological magnification. So for example, if you have a little fish, right, and it has a milligram of DDT in it, and then a big fish eats 10 of those, then that bigger fish is going to have 10 milligrams. And let's say an even bigger fish eats 10 of those, it's going to have 100. And then you get a top predator like a brown pelican or a falcon or bald eagle, and they eat a few of those big fish, they're going to have tons of DDT in them, or any kind of chemical that is soluble in fat. So the heavy metals, like mercury, those are all going to do the same thing. So with DDT, so the concentrations are greater in organisms higher up the food chain. And so eggshells, what happens is eggshells of these top predatory birds were really thin. And when the birds would sit on their nests, they would crush their eggs. And so there was a dramatic decrease in population size. And since then, DDT has been banned in many parts of the world. So some cycles that we just need to go over. So the carbon cycle, I'm sure you've had this before. There's things called carbon sinks or reservoirs, and that would be like the ocean, right? And the plants. And then carbon sources are going to be plant respiration and animal respiration and decomposition, and also auto and factory emissions. So if you see here, photosynthesis is going to fix carbon, right? That's what it means to turn carbon dioxide into organic carbon that then organisms can eat. Decaying organisms like bacteria are going to decompose waste products and dead organisms, and they're also going to contribute to carbon dioxide. And then plant respiration and animal respiration is going to contribute to carbon dioxide, and then again, photosynthesis will fix it. So some issues with carbon dioxide levels, the greenhouse gases and global climate change. So the greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and then some other ones. And so the greenhouse effect is actually a good thing. It allows us to live on the planet, because if we didn't have it, then our planet would be super hot during the day and freezing cold at night, and nothing would be able to survive. So what happens is most of the radiation from the sun is absorbed by the Earth's surface. Some of it bounces off, but then it has a layer in the atmosphere of these greenhouse gases. And so a lot of the energy that is radiated from the Earth is trapped in those in the atmosphere. Instead of being released, it's trapped and it's pushed back onto the Earth. And so the more you have of those greenhouse gases, the warmer the Earth becomes. And I think of it as like a sleeping bag, right? So if you have a down sleeping bag, the heat from your body gets trapped. The thicker your sleeping bag, the more it's going to be able to keep you warm. So it's a good thing to a certain point, but now it's causing the temperatures of the planet to increase. So nitrogen is another cycle, and we need nitrogen to make proteins and nucleic acids. And it is the scarcest of all the nutrients on the planet, because most of our nitrogen is in the atmosphere in the form of N2. And that is not usable by organisms. So what bacteria do is they cycle the nitrogen, they fix it and turn it into nitrates. And then organisms can pick up those nitrates and turn them into amino acids to make proteins, or nucleic acids to make DNA and RNA. Phosphorus is also a necessary nutrient, but if it's in excess, it can be detrimental. So eutrophication is something you need to know about, and that's caused when you have a lot of agricultural runoff of fertilizers, which fertilizers have a lot of phosphorus in them, into aquatic ecosystems. And so what happens is that phosphorus goes into the ecosystem, the algae eat it up, and you get an algal bloom, which looks like this. And then once the phosphorus runoff is decreased or isn't there anymore, then all those algae die. They sink to the bottom of the water of the pond or lake or whatever. And then the bacteria decompose them. And when the bacteria are decomposing them, they're sucking up oxygen because of cellular respiration, and they're causing the rest of the water to become what's called anoxic. And that means no oxygen. And so if there's no oxygen or very low oxygen in the lake, then the other organisms like fish and insects can't survive. And that's it. Hope you learned something about energy flow through ecosystems.